Hello and welcome back to KXAN Plus. I'm your host, Esmeralda Zamora, and today is our Wednesday's Kristen's Classroom segment with, of course, our KXAN meteorologist, Kristen Currie. Kristen, thanks for joining me. How are you doing?
Pretty good. It's been a busy morning tracking the potential for more rain this afternoon locally, but also talking about the tropics. That kind of ties in with today's episode.
Yeah, the tropics have been a pretty hot topic recently, and of course, it's not the end of hurricane season, so of course it's going to be a hot topic. But today we're going to talk about defense systems that places or cities or beaches have created, right?
Yeah, and I'll give you a little bit of background on this. If you remember a few weeks ago, we did a Houston field trip series with Kristen's Classroom. One of the spots that I had the opportunity to visit was Galveston, the beaches right there. And I had the opportunity to, walk along the seawall, and I thought, hey, this might be a really, teachable moment, I think, for some of the students that we have back here in Central Texas about the different ways that we try and protect ourselves and our property from hurricanes. But then I was thinking, well, let's not just stop at the seawall. Let's kind of look into different ways that cities are trying to protect their land and their infrastructure from landfalling tropical systems. So I figured we'll highlight a few of those first, and then we'll get into a tropics update.
Yeah, let's do it. I was peeking into your article, and a lot of places are so creative with their defense systems.
Not only that, but they've been doing this for a long time too. And that was one thing that really stood out to me. So we'll first start with one of the, long-term solutions that we've seen here in Texas, the Galveston seawall. So with the seawall, this was started in the early 1900s after the 1900 Galveston hurricane, which to this day is the deadliest hurricane we've seen make landfall here in the United States. But this was also, 1900. So we didn't have the technology, the forecasting abilities that we do now. But since then, it was a group of three people, a lot of them with engineering backgrounds, that said, we need to do something here. We need to protect our area, as obviously Galveston sits right there on the coastline. So they built this seawall. It's 17 feet tall. It's about 5 foot base. And now in 2025, since we've made additions and such, it runs 10 miles down the coastline. Wow. So when I had the opportunity to visit, what really stood out to me was the height of it at first, and obviously so, but the sand goes right up to the base of this seawall. And what also stood out to me was the fact that it's not just a wall. It's a curved wall. It bows outward. Depending on what you consider outward, it blows away from the sea. So once the wave comes and hits that, it's forced to go up and kind of curve back on itself to prevent that water from coming on shore. And I thought that was so creative, right? Just playing into the dynamics of how water moves and how it would follow that curve of the wall up and over and fall back down on itself. So the Galveston seawall, again, it's very evident. It goes all the way down the Galveston coastline, past the pier and such. But this is what it looks like if I kind of hung my phone and took a picture running down it. It's pretty significant. 17 feet, is tall. And then you see the sand that kind of comes down from there and goes all the way out into the water.
And Kristen, do you know exactly how much it cost them to build something like this?
It was over $1 million back then.
Wow.
You think $1 million in the early 1900s was a ton of money, right? And so they have since made extensions, as I said, that go down and extend that towards the coastline. And it's also important before we kind of launch further into this discussion. A seawall is not going to stop a hurricane, right?
Absolutely
it's not going to prevent a hurricane from coming on shore. What we're talking about today are different kind of man-made mechanisms that we've thought about, that we've built or are going to build, that hopefully prevents some further deterioration or further property damage of these systems coming on shore. And the seawall is one of them. Again, this was based off of the devastation that they saw in the 1900 hurricane. And there was actually a couple hurricanes after that after they built the seawall initially, it helped and it withstood some of those waves in that storm surge. So they said, hey, this thing works. Let's keep building onto it. So now it runs at 10 miles down the coastline.
And do you know if any other cities or beach towns have followed in their footsteps by creating something like this?
Not that I can think of this size. Now, I will tell you, I have been to Lake Charles, Louisiana, in some of the coastlines there where there's certainly a wall up from the water, but most of the coastline outside of Texas, I mean, if you think about Louisiana and Mississippi in particular, a lot of what's right there on the beach is swampland, right? And so that swamps and some of those bayous are actually the natural preventative ways that can slow down storm surge and winds. And that could be a whole nother Kristen's classroom, right? The opposite of man-made being natural. Some of the natural ways in the Everglades in the Florida area are the same thing. I'm not certain of anything of this size anywhere else. I think the Galveston seawall, built after that major hurricane, is one that kind of stands out to me, especially being here in Texas. If you've been down to Galveston at all, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and if you're in Texas, why not drive just a few hours to go visit it?
And it's pretty. It is really, really pretty. And kind of tying into this, the second man-made hurricane defense system that I wanted to talk about, which is not yet in place, but it has been proposed. It's been talked about for years. The Ike Dike. This was a project that was created by a Texas A&M University professor after Hurricane Ike. September 2008 brought 15, 20-foot storm surge to parts of the Texas coastline and devastated parts of the Texas coastline as it did so. So the Ike Dike was formed years ago. It has certainly gone through some funding challenges, as most big infrastructure projects do. But both federally and locally, funding has kind of been struggling a bit because this is expected to cost billions and billions of dollars to put into place. But I really liked these graphics that Texas A&M had put together for a presentation they did, because it plays into three different components of the Ike Dike, and one is building onto that already existing seawall that we just talked about. So you see there that yellow stretch, and they had included a photo of that seawall. So it would be building onto that already existing Galveston seawall. This is kind of a zoomed in version of that Galveston, Houston metro region here. You're looking at Galveston Bay and obviously the Houston Ship Channel, but also the land extensions of the protection afforded by that seawall. So we have these barrier islands, we have these strips of land, and kind of beefing those up. And sometimes that's as simple as just importing sand and putting it there, making these hardened sand dunes. So the center of the sand dune is actually something like cement, and then they throw sand on top of it. That way it doesn't, completely wash away and turn into flat land. But then I think the biggest part, and probably the most costly part, would be these gates, these floodgates that they actually already do in different parts of the world. The Netherlands in particular comes to mind. These floodgates they would put at the entrances of the ship channels, of the Bolivar Road, things like that, to San Luis Pass. They have these gates, and I think I have one more picture. This is what it looks like.
Wow.
Yeah, from the Texas General Land Office. I thought, great visual when that gate is closed. When the shipping channel or whatever, they would close those floodgates and act as a barrier for some of the storm surge. Again, it's not stopping a hurricane or tropical storm. It's just slowing it down, because a lot of the damage that we could see from a hurricane isn't just the fact that it's a lot of water. There's power behind that water. Yeah. There's power behind storm surge. There's power behind waves. So this kind of being put in front of that would slow that down. And you can kind of see they almost pivot like a fan. So when they're not closed and they open, they would slide back in over those green spaces there.
And Kristen, from this picture, it looks like those little white gates are pretty small, but how tall above the water are they actually?
I'm not sure. This is all, like I said, it's not built yet. It's all kind of a proposal here. And I would assume they would be pretty tall, not quite, a dam status, but in between the seawall and the dam. And this would be at some of those major passes, those major water thoroughfares between the Gulf into the Galveston Bay area. It'd be interesting because kind of tying into the next project here, or the next mechanism, are the levees. And I say that because you run the risk of building something like a seawall in an dike and saying, okay, these should be able to withstand a category 2 or a category 3. And then the next hurricane hits, the next Katrina, the next Sandy, the next Harvey, and people will sometimes, they could get a false sense of security with things like this, and the seawall is there, that's going to protect us. And I think sometimes, in studying Hurricane Katrina, there was a little bit of that in New Orleans in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina came on shore of, the levees, which were built in and around New Orleans to withstand a category 3 storm, which Hurricane Katrina was by the time it did move onshore. Obviously, they failed, right?
And Katrina had so much power.
So much power, so much water. I mean, it was a category 5 in the Gulf. Luckily, it had weakened some by the time it got on shore here. But this is a picture, obviously, of those levees failing. These levees are in and around the city. They also have drainage pumps to get water out of the city, as New Orleans does sit below sea level there. But I thought this was interesting because if it was, category 1 tropical storm and such, this could absolutely help, right? It's certainly not going to hurt, but the problem is when they do fail, it makes a bad situation catastrophic. And that's what we saw with Hurricane Katrina, was the fact that the storm came through, so much water, levee broke, all of that water that was supposed to be, from the Mississippi River funneling into the Gulf, now all of a sudden is funneling into the city. And you have areas that sit below sea level. So not only is the water going to be gravitating towards that, but then it just sits there. There's nowhere for it to go because that's the lowest point. Water's going to flow to the lowest point. And so, you see the devastation in some of the videos and photos of like the 9th ward, right? Many of those wards were underwater for several days. And then the heat sets in. And so now not only are you underwater, you have no AC, you have no power, and everything's surrounded and waterlogged by this water that was supposed to be, canaled through the levees to the Gulf and no longer is. So it is in theory a very, I think, brilliant system, especially for, a city that does sit below sea level. But it's 350 miles of levees. Since Katrina in 2005, they have re-strengthened and kind of bolstered up 100 miles of those levees after so many of them broke after Katrina there. But this started with Hurricane Betsy was in the 1960s. Then they really started to invest in these levees and the drainage system. And then Katrina came in 2005, one of the worst natural disasters we've seen in modern history. And so since then, they've started to re-bolster what they already had initially bolstered up, if that makes sense.
So the levees are pretty much kind of like some canals that they build off the sides of the neighborhoods. Exactly,
yeah. So it's a designated waterway, right? Okay. But it's built by man with these concrete walls that line these levees or canals that funnel the water from an area that it would naturally pool in back down into the Gulf. And so they're all over the place if you've ever been to New Orleans. And just some of the videos coming out of Katrina, which is, crazy to think that next week, a week and a half from now, it's the 20th, marks 20 years since Hurricane Katrina. And you'll see a lot of discussion about that here in the next coming week too. But this is what it kind of looks like, that natural gravitation of putting the water to where we want it to go and then funneling it back down, just getting pulled into the Gulf and not into neighborhoods. But there's obviously some failures with that.
Kristen, before we move on to the other types of defense systems, I wanted to answer my own question that I had for you on if there was other places with seawalls.
Yes.
And actually, for living in Corpus, I remembered, it clicked to me, like, we have a seawall, and it's different. It's built differently than the Galveston one. It has kind of like steps here.
The stairs, yeah.
But it's the same it's for the same purpose.
Same idea. Yeah. And New Orleans has one of those too, right up against the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
And so there's these smaller seawall type structures. And it would honestly shock me if most cities along the coastline don't have something like that. But as far as the magnitude of 10 miles, 17 foot high.
Yeah, that one is a monster.
I hadn't heard of anything other than the seawall, but I think that's fantastic. I mean, Corpus Christi is another prime example of, living on the coastline, and what we talk about too, if you've ever been with us when we track a hurricane in the Gulf, getting closer to Texas. The Gulf is very shallow, right? And so those waves come up. It's not just, I'm sorry. Getting crazy with my hands. Not just a big wave. I mean, these waves kind of gradually roll in, right?
Yeah.
And so the slope of the continental shelf is what we call it, but the slope of the land underneath the water also plays into the storm surge there. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to see all the different ways. I mean, because if you go down there too, Galveston does have a lot of those little barrier islands, a lot of those sand dunes that maybe aren't quite as abundant in different parts of the Texas coastline.
Yeah, it's different everywhere. The
different everywhere, yeah.
It's so different all around Texas.
It's interesting. We even talked about that this morning. We were talking about the undertow. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Before? That the current that kind of pulls you a little bit down the beach line when you're wading in the waves and such.
You look back and you're like, whoa, where did my mom go?
I drifted, all the way over here. And growing up in California, that was very strong. I mean, you had to pay attention to it because that undertow was very strong more days than not. When I was in Destin a few months ago, Destin, Florida, nothing. I mean, you could just stand there in the water. You felt no pull any which way. Wow. And I was under the impression growing up in California that
it happens everywhere.
This is what it's like everywhere. Yeah. Now, if there's a storm off coast and such, you're going to start to feel, those different underwater currents. We're talking a lot about Hurricane Erin and the rip current threat today. But I just thought it was interesting, with all the different coastal areas favoring different sorts of currents, some storm surge mechanisms and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I need to test that next time I go to the beach.
Before I get too off track. Other defenses, artificial reefs. Basically, putting things underwater, whether it be, a ship. I think we talked about it actually not too long ago on Kristen's classroom, the SS United States, I think, an old ship that they're purposely sinking off the coast of California to bolster the reefs, the coral reefs in the underwater ecosystem. Yeah. So they're cleaning it up and polishing it up, and they're going to sink it. It's an old ship. It's not being used anymore. They're going to sink it and create an artificial reef. So artificial being, it's not naturally made. Mm-hmm. And so these underwater reefs will slow down the momentum of waves and the power of storm surge. Importing sand, we kind of got into this a little bit of moving sand along a beach and same thing, kind of slowing down the momentum, adding friction to these waves and these showers. Culverts and canals doing the same thing. Aqua fences. Aqua fences would be, these actually kind of came into the conversation not too long ago. And the reason I included it in, because it's a little bit more individual approach and not necessarily, like big city infrastructure. They're these individual portable panels that you fill with water so they stand up and they can be put in front of buildings, hospitals, power stations that, again, work to prevent water from coming in. So
it's a water fence to prevent water from coming in.
Basically, yeah. Think of it almost like an inflatable pool, but the pool, instead of air, you fill it with water so it stands straight up. And there's a little bit of a stand on it so they don't lean.
Tip over.
Yeah, but I actually noticed this with not only some of the hospitals in Florida with recent hurricanes, but some of the news stations will actually do this too. Put these aqua fences around the news station to prevent some of that water from coming inside. And then I added in the Highland Lakes just because, although we're not on the coast, it is a defense mechanism against flooding. It's a way to mitigate flooding
here
and
locally.
Control it. Yeah, with Central Texas. So we years and years and years ago, decades ago, took the Colorado River and dammed it up, right? Mm-hmm. And by we, as the Lower Colorado River Authority, added these dams as a way to slow and manage and control as much as we could flooding water. The reason I included it is because kind of like what we saw in July with the decaying tropical storm Barry, no longer a tropical storm, but tropical in nature, a lot of water produced from that storm, that dumped water, all of it kind of funneling in up top. You saw the rise in Lake Buchanan, you saw the rise in Lake Travis, but the Mansfield Dam that holds up Lake Travis, we never really saw all those floodgates open, right? Those managed to, LCRA kept those shut because we wanted to fill up the lake. If we were going to get the water, we wanted to hold it. We wanted to store it not only for, drinking water first and foremost, but also there's hydropower coming out of those dams. But also we knew that water needed a place to go. So why not fill the lakes with it? And the only way to store and capture that water would be to put a dam. Hence, that's how we got the Highland Lakes out of the Colorado River.
Yeah. If anyone is interested in kind of finding out what we do with our water when we do have catastrophic floods like the one in July, Nick and I spoke on Nick's First Warning Weather, a stream here on KXAN Plus, exactly about that. Yep. So you can find that on our website or our app as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's something we talked a lot about in July. So I love the fact that now lives forever on the app, because I think that it's a big question for people who aren't from here. It's a weird kind of concept of, wait, what, you guys open the floodgates? And there's always, a little bit of water moving through no matter what to generate that hydroelectric power. But it is a very crucial and smart man-made flooding defense system that we have here in Central Texas that we're able to use during catastrophes like what we saw in July.
Yeah, and a lot of people who live here also don't even know about it. So
right.
It's a great way to read up and kind of inform yourself on what happens with the water.
For sure. And, while we're here, just before I lose time, I promised you that update on Hurricane Erin. Category 2 storm. Hurricane winds of 100 miles per hour. It is still moving at the northwest at 13 miles per hour. That might concern some, because you're thinking, well, what's to the northwest? The United States, right? We still anticipate with the latest update this to take that more northeasterly turn here within the next few hours, and eventually it gets spit out into the northern Atlantic in weekends. But still likely to be that Category 2 storm through tomorrow and Friday, eventually weakening down to that Category 1 strength on the start of the weekend. On Saturday, no landfall. However, this thing is big, strong, and it's close, right? So this is where those impacts to the United States come in. And again, this can kind of play into the conversation we have. If you notice, they have some of those barrier islands or the Outer Banks in North Carolina. And so that's going to slow some of that momentum and power of the waves coming in, but it's not going to deflect the hurricane completely. We have tropical storm warnings up, burgundy color, storm surge warnings in the hot pink. Then we have those tropical storm watches a little further north in that like watermelon color. Bottom line, wave heights could be about 15 to 20 feet here. So, which is crazy to think, because you think, big waves, obviously with a hurricane, but these are waves bigger than what we were expecting with the tsunami that hit Hawaii not too long ago.
How big were those?
I think this biggest I saw was
like
between
8?
7 to 12.
Yeah.
12 feet. So, I mean, think about that, and this is the same kind of thing where it's just wave after wave coming in by this strong hurricane that's just a glancing blow as it continues to move towards the northeast. Storm surge could be anywhere from 2 to 4 feet, in addition to the tropical storm force winds, tropical storm like rain showers that are going to be pushing in with those outer bands. So there is big concern for beach erosion, coastal highways being impassable, ocean overwash. I mean, all sorts of things here with this powerful storm just kind of riding parallel up this eastern seaboard. The rip current threat is it's extreme. And this started a few days ago. I think it was, today's Wednesday. Monday, we reported that 60 people got trapped in a rip current, had to be rescued on Monday. And that storm was still hundreds of miles away,
wow.
So we are concerned about it. And, like you said at the top of the show,
it's not the end.
It's not the end.
Is this the first one we've had?
This is the first hurricane.
Yeah.
Erin is the first hurricane. It was not only our first hurricane, but first major hurricane.
Yeah.
Reaching that Category 5 strength over the weekend.
Quickly, too.
Quickly, so fast, rapidly intensifying. But I wanted to show you, before we lost time, we do have 2 more tropical waves right behind it. So you'll notice there, the one right behind Erin has a 60% probability of further organization. And the one right behind that's got 40%, new this morning, 40% medium odds of further organization. So it's that time of year. We're right mid to late August, early September.
Why are they all coming this way towards us? That's my question.
So it's carried by the predominant winds here. So we've got the trade winds out there, and that is a largely east to west. I think, yes, east to west flow, and because we live in the westerlies up here in the United States, in Texas, and so below us are the trade winds that move east to west. And so the general flow of this is to be carried from Africa, these tropical waves moving across the Atlantic, and then either being deflected up and around that ridge of high pressure, or sometimes being carried into the United States, sometimes being carried through the Caribbean and into the, the Gulf. It all kind of depends on what the upper level winds look like, but that predominant flow being east to west is going to carry these tropical waves our direction this time of year.
Wow. So if you have any vacations planned, keep track of the tropics before you go.
Absolutely. And this, it's unfortunate because you never want to be dealing with any sort of hurricane threat or tropical system threat. My parents are actually going to the Keys this weekend, the Florida Keys. So they're like, what's going on? And it's, you want to give people direct answers. And unfortunately, sometimes this far out, things can change.
You just got to sit and wait.
It's a very much a watch and wait scenario, especially with these so far out in the Atlantic. This third wave that just popped in. There's no way of knowing where that's going to go. Obviously, it's going to get closer to the United States just because of the wind flow here. But right now, the concern would be Hurricane Erin. I will also tell you, kind of going back into what we talked about at the top as far as hurricane preparation. It does come down to awareness, I think, of knowing we have the seawalls, we have the levees, we could potentially have the Ike Dike if we can fund it and find the money and the time. It was said, I think they said 2 years to build, but there's always going to be these storms that do what you never thought would be possible. What was Tropical Storm Barry? What also comes to mind is Hurricane Helene. Hurricane Helene was a Category 4 storm that made landfall in the Florida Panhandle. Yet it's never going to be known for that. Hurricane Helene is going to be known for devastating Western North Carolina, right? And so there's no seawall, there's no levee in the world in North Carolina that's going to be able to save, life and property from that kind of a storm being thrown up into, parts of the Carolinas. So I just wanted to end with that of we've done some really good things. We've made some really smart moves, I think, in trying to do what we can to slow these storms down and to protect life and property. But I will always tell people it is not worth your life to stay.
Exactly.
You really have to make an effort to evacuate and evacuate in a timely manner. Because, kind of like what we saw with Hurricane Rita, sometimes when there's this mass exodus at the end, then people get stuck and you run out of gas, and there's even more of this like panic and chaos than otherwise would be if everyone, listened either the day before or stayed put.
Or when you know that hurricane season is about to start or coming up, please prepare. Get all the things that you need, emergency kits. Keep your phone on you in case there's any weather alerts you need to hear. Because people like Kristen Currie are reminding us every single day we need to be aware.
It's tough. I mean, my dad is exactly the type, of person to be like, I've been through worse, right? I can do this. And the problem with evacuations more often than not is if things don't go as planned, if the water is more than we thought, if the forecast rainfall is more than we thought, and you need help, first responders cannot get to you in a timely manner when it's still hurricaning, right? Yeah. When it's still dumping buckets, when it's still flooding. First responders, local officials cannot get to you and in those conditions. So it's not going to be immediate like you want it to. And that's something I remind people a lot of. Okay, if you stay, just know that you're in it and you're committing until after the storm is over.
And you also need to think about you're putting the first responders' lives at risk because they're having to get into that storm to save you. And it's a really low chance.
Yeah, it is tough. I will say there's so many different documentaries too about these hurricanes and such. I recently watched one on National Geographic. Small plug, obviously they're not paying for me to say this, but I thought it was really eye-opening about the levees of Hurricane Katrina and how they failed in general. Mm-hmm. And when you watch something like that, it changes you. Your thought. There's no way.
It scares you.
There's no way that I'd be able to endure what some of those survivors endured. Like, I don't know if I'm a strong enough person to be able to sit on my roof in 105-degree weather in New Orleans with high humidity for days, because they can't find me, or if there's
rescued,
hundreds of people needing rescued, and where you fall in that line to where they can come get you. There's just so many of those nightmare scenarios that sometimes those documentaries, as hard as they are to watch, it is very eye-opening to maybe preventing yourself from ever getting into a situation like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very scary and dangerous, and it's not over. Again, hurricane season is not over.
And we'll never wish for a bad storm. We wish it's end sooner rather than later. But we'll be here tracking each and every storm as it does come. Luckily, as I said, Hurricane Aaron is the only storm right now we have that we're truly concerned about, but there is no threat to Texas. It's only going to be out in the Atlantic, but we'll have to watch a couple of other tropical waves right behind it.
Yeah. After you taught me the word fish storm, that's my favorite word, and those are my favorite storms because they're away.
Me too. When it's more of the fish and maybe diverting some of those carnival cruises around, that hopefully is best case scenario, but we know that not all storms do that.
No, they don't. Well, we have your article here on our website, KXAN.com. It is titled Hurricane Defense Systems, and we have all of the details, all of the different types of defense systems that you shared with us, as well as photos and information on this article. Kristen, is there anything else I may have missed?
Nothing that you may have missed, but can I give you a sneak peek of next week?
Yes.
Okay, next week, and I'm really excited about this. If you are a loyal KXANer, you might have heard us talk before to Gabe Cox. He is our storm chaser here at KXAN. He is going to be coming on to an episode of Kristen's Classroom. And for 30 minutes, we're going to be able to pick his brain. So if you have any questions for a storm chaser, for Gabe personally, he was there for the Round Rock tornado. He was there for the Temple tornado. He was all over. He's been with us for some major weather events we've had over the last several years. You can email me those questions. I'd be happy to relay them to him. But Gabe Cox, our storm chaser, is going to be on our next episode of Kristen's Classroom.
I am so excited.
Me too. And that's, when he reached out, he's like, hey, if you ever want, I'm like, yes, when
please.
Can you be here? So next week, next Wednesday, we're going to get that done. So look for that on KXAN Plus.
Yes, and you can send all those questions to reportit@kxan.com. And I will be sending my questions too, because I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
Well, thanks for joining us, Kristen, and we will see you next week.
Sounds good.